Okay. What is manufacturing? The word manufacture originates from Latin manufacere, meaning make by hand. Manus is hand and facere is to make. Manufacturing make products and then sell the product. Okay? So ginagawa ang produkto. So let us discuss merchandising versus manufacturing. In merchandising business, we determine the value of the product by calculating how much it costs to buy the product. Kung magkano natin binili. In manufacturing, we determine the value of the product by calculating how much it costs to make the product. Okay? Clear ba yan, class? Let us discuss cost to make the product. Manufacturing business incurs the following costs in making the product. Ano-ano yon? First is raw materials. Yung mga materials na gagamitin sa pag-manufacture ng product. And in accounting, the terminology that we are going to use is direct materials. Okay? Next is that labor. We have to hire labor para gawin yung ating produkto. And in accounting, the term that we are going to use is direct labor. Okay? And now the other expenses on production. Dahil we are going to do the manufacturing, we will incur expenses in the production. And in accounting, the terminology that we are going to use is factory overhead. Factory overhead can also be called manufacturing overhead. Synonymous sila. Okay, class? You can call it factory overhead or you can call it manufacturing overhead. Okay. Direct materials, direct labor, and factory overhead are called the elements of manufacturing cost. Okay? Yun nagme-make up ng manufacturing cost. Okay, let us discuss each one. Let us first discuss direct materials. Direct materials, these are raw materials that are directly used in making the product. Directly na ginagamit mo, okay? Example, lumber, yung mga wood, and paint. And wood and paint used to make tables or furniture. Ginagamit ang wood tsaka ang paint, okay? Actually, class, if you will look at the product, kung ano more or less makikita mo doon yung materialis na ginagamit, no? Basta tinignan mo yung table, malalaman mo, oh, ang ginamit nito, lumber, paint, or varnish, okay? Yun ang direct materials. Basta tinignan mo yung isang bag, you can see that it is, the direct materials would be leather, zipper, okay? Those are the direct materials. And next is direct labor. Direct labor is the cost of workers that are directly involved in manufacturing the product. So, ito yung mga labors na sila mismo ang gumagawa. Dumadaan sa kamay nila yung processing ng product o yung paggawa ng product. Okay, this includes people working with their hands or operating machines used to manufacture the product. So, direct labor yan. Okay, the third one is factory overhead or manufacturing overhead. So, factory overhead includes all expenses in the factory that are not direct materials and direct labor. So, yung factory overhead natin, lahat na ng expenses, basta hindi siya direct materials, hindi siya direct labor, factory overhead na siya. So, ang kasama dyan will be the factory expenses, mga expenses in the factory or production area. And these are mga rent expense, insurance expense, utilities expense, depreciation expense ng factory building tsaka equipment, supplies used in the factory, at tsaka lahat ng office expenses in the factory or production area. If yung merong computer na ginagamit yung secretary ni production manager, yung mga depreciation noon, tsaka yung supplies, mga print, mga ink sa printer, all of these expenses, kung nandoon siya sa factory or nandoon siya sa production area, will fall part as factory expenses. Okay? So, ang factory overhead, isa doon ay factory expenses. Okay. Another under factory overhead is indirect materials. Meron tayong direct materials class, di ba? So, in direct materials, yun yung nakikita mo sa produkto. Okay, ang indirect materials, these are materials used in the manufacturing the product, but cost of the material is insignificant. Hindi malaki ang cost niya dun sa product. Okay? Not like direct materials. And in most cases, yung indirect materials, hindi mo siya na-visualize o nakikita sa product. Anong example nito? Nuts, screws, and bolts in manufacturing a car. Nails and sandpaper in manufacturing tables, cabinets, and chairs. Okay? So itong mga ito are indirect materials at kasama siya sa factory overhead. Okay? So these are our indirect materials. Okay, next na isa pa sa factory overhead is indirect labor. Meron tayong direct labor class, di ba? Yung direct labor natin, yun mismo ang gumagawa ng product. Ang indirect labor this is the cost of personnel not directly involved in manufacturing the product, but forms part of the factory operations. Hindi sila involved sa paggawa ng product, pero nandoon sila, empleyado sila ng factory. Sino-sino ito? Wages, ito yung cost ng mga factory supervisors, forklift operators, cleaners, and security guards. So basically, wala naman silang engagement dun sa paggawa ng product, pero nandoon sila sa factory. Yung security, sinesecure yung premises. Ito, forklift operator ito. Nag-move lang ito ng item from one location to another location. Okay? And of course, the cleaners. Okay. So, if they are within the factory in the production area at meron silang mga sweldo, yung cost nila, o kahit na yung mga overtime nila, will be part of the indirect labor. Okay? So, tatlo ang ating factory overhead. Factory expenses, indirect materials, and indirect labor. Okay. Now, let us take a look of the accounts under merchandising and under manufacturing. Sa merchandising, okay, what we are going to discuss here, class, is yung difference lang ng accounts, no? So, sa asset accounts, under merchandising, meron tayong inventory. Pero yung other accounts under asset, walang difference yun. Inventory account lang ang may difference between merchandising and manufacturing. Okay, sa inventory account, iisa lang ang inventory natin sa merchandising. Sa manufacturing, we have three types of inventory. We have the inventory for direct materials, and inventory for work in process, and inventory for finished goods. Okay, didiscuss natin yung tatlong yan. Okay, so just take note, in manufacturing, there are three types of inventory: direct materials, work in process, and finished goods. Okay, pagdating sa liability and equity, walang difference. Pagdating sa revenue, wala ring difference. So, ang revenue nila parehas is sales. Of course, from sales, we will deduct sales discounts and sales returns and allowances. Okay, walang difference. Both are using sales account. Okay? Okay. Now, class, We are going to present now the difference of merchandising in relation to cost of goods sold. So sa merchandising, ang cost of goods sold natin na pinag-aralan natin, it will be purchases, then we will have to deduct the purchase discount, then deduct purchase returns and allowances plus freight in. Actually, class, yung dinideduct natin at ina-add nating what do you call this, inventory beginning, inventory end, okay? Those are timing differences. But in actuality, ito lang talaga yung cost of goods sold. Kung lahat ng binili natin, naibenta natin, and that will be our cost of goods sold. We have discussed this, okay? And this is what you call our product cost. For manufacturing, ang cost of goods sold natin will be the manufacturing cost, which are the direct materials, direct labor, and factory overhead. And under factory overhead, we have factory expenses, we have the indirect materials and indirect labor, and these are our manufacturing costs. And class, these are also our product cost. Okay? Okay, class. In terms of expenses, there's no difference. Okay? However, in manufacturing, we will do the classification of expenses by functional. Ang ibig sabihin, yung functions. Okay? We have two functions, selling expenses, tapos lahat ng expenses na ito, delivery expenses, freight out, marketing expenses, salaries of salesman and sales personnel, commission, supplies, rent, utilities, and other expenses used by sales in our marketing department. Okay, i-identify naman yan na kung selling siya. Okay? So we are classifying it as on a functional basis of selling. Yung other classification na gagamitin natin for this a lesson will be the administrative expenses. And administrative expenses, lahat din ng expenses in relation to the administration offices, yung Office of the President, Finance, HRO, IT, Logistics, okay, so research, okay, class, okay. So for manufacturing, we will be classifying expenses according to its function, and these are the one in the factory, okay, selling, and administrative. Yun nasa factory, part siya ng product cost or manufacturing cost. But for selling and administrative expenses, this is what you call the period cost, okay? Sa on a particular period, kaya period siya. Okay? Okay, class, let us discuss the next slide. The flow of manufacturing cost. These are our manufacturing costs. Okay? Under factory overhead, we have factory expenses, indirect materials, indirect labor. And class, direct materials and direct labor is what you call prime cost. Bakit? Kasi sa product, ito ang significant portion ng cost ng product. Okay, direct materials and direct labor. And direct labor and factory overhead, it is called conversion cost because the direct labor and this factory overhead converts the materials into a finished product, kaya conversion cost. Kasi hindi mako-convert into finished product ang materials without incurring this cost. Okay? So, yung direct materials natin, okay, basta gagawa na tayo, we will put that yung materials na kailangan sa production area, so we will transfer the cost here, yung direct materials, and then we will now employ labor to do the conversion of the direct materials. So gawin yung mga product, and we will now have the direct labor cost here, and we will also incur factory overhead in the production area. So basta nandoon na sa production area, sa factory area, ginagawa na yung product, yung mga cost of this manufacturing will now be part of what you call the work in process. Okay? The work in process na siya, ginagawa na siya. And then basta natapos ng gawin, then its cost will now be transferred as finished goods. Okay? Ita-transfer na siya as finished goods. Then it will be transferred to the sales area and then ibibenta natin na sa customers. Okay, class? Okay. So, in effect, class, we have 3 inventory accounts of manufacturing. Ang example natin ng mga inventory account na ito will be for furniture business. Okay. Meron tayong inventory sa ating warehouse. Ano yung inventory natin sa warehouse natin? Ang inventory natin sa warehouse, yung mga materials na hindi nagamit. Kunyari, at the end of accounting period, December 31st, yung mga natira sa warehouse is our inventory. However, we have 2 periods. Meron tayong two inventory. We have our inventory beginning of our direct materials. Ito yung inventory from last year, okay? And we have the inventory end. Ito yung inventory, okay, for the current year, at the end of the period ng current year, okay? And we also have another na inventory natin is production area. Ito yung production area dito, pinaprocess yung goods. So magkakaroon din tayo ng inventory dito. Yung inventory dito is what you call work in process. Ito yung mga items na hindi natapos. Okay? We will have work in process inventory beginning. Ito yung hindi natapos from last year. Natatapusin natin for this year. And for this year naman, meron din tayong mga hindi natapos. And that will be your work in process inventory end. Okay? And then we also have inventory in our sales area finished goods. Okay? Ito yung mga inventory natin na hindi nabenta, goods not sold. We will have 2 inventories also. The finished goods inventory beginning. Ito yung hindi naibenta from last year, mga finished goods na hindi nabenta. And naman for this year, we will have another inventory which is the finished goods inventory and ito yung mga finished goods na hindi naibenta for this year. Take note, class, the 3 inventory accounts. We have the direct materials inventory beginning and inventory end, the work in process inventory beginning and end, and the finished goods inventory beginning and end. Okay? Let's continue. Okay, class. Let us now discuss the product cost per unit. So we have learned that your total product cost will be, or the manufacturing cost. So it will be your direct materials, you will add your direct labor, you will have your factory overhead. That will be your total product cost. But how are you going to get the product cost per unit? Simple lang yan. So yung product cost per unit natin will be equivalent to the total product cost, okay, divided by kung ilang units ang na-produce mo. The number of units produced, that will give you the product cost per unit. Bakit importanteng malaman mo yung product cost per unit? Para malaman mo kung magkano yung cost mo sa isang unit, para alam mo kung magkano mo siya ibibenta, yung unit na yun. If you will calculate it like sa television set, dapat malaman mo muna yung cost ng TV before you will be able to determine how much your selling price is. Okay? It is also important to get your prime cost and conversion cost per unit. So the total prime cost, we have learned that prime cost consists of direct materials plus direct labor. That will be your total prime cost. So if you are going to get the total the prime cost per unit, it is equivalent to total prime cost divided by the number of units produced. And for conversion cost, is equivalent to direct labor plus factory overhead. Okay? And then if we are going to get the conversion cost per unit, it will be total conversion cost divided by number of units produced. Okay, class? Any question? Okay, class. If you have questions,